Good afternoon, education students. I'm Lily, and I'm going to be doing my presentation on mathematics for autism spectrum disorder. And it's going to be a presentation on some resources that have been found and developed to help students. So I'm going to start off with the Christian perspective on differentiation. And Genesis 1 talks about how every student and every person is made perfect in God's image. And it highlights the fact that as humans, we're all perfect, that God didn't make mistakes, and that and our students shouldn't feel as if they were made as a mistake either, and that they should be enhanced, that their differences should be enhanced, and they all feel accepted, and they should all have an opportunity to learn as well, because even though that may look a little bit different, they're learning, they still deserve that. 1 Peter 3 verses 8 says, "Finally, all of you be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, and be compassionate and humble." I love that part about being sympathetic, because as a teacher, for me, I feel like I've been given so much, and that I need to remember that other people aren't as fortunate, that we should be sympathetic to all walks of life that people take, and that God also calls us to be compassionate, so showing love to all who need it. And people who were born with a disability didn't choose for that to be the case. It's not our place as teachers to be judging them or to be thinking of them as different or lesser. It's actually to treat them the same, to help support them, to give them the best possible chance at fulfilling their God-given purpose, because we know as Christians, we all have a purpose and a place to go. And it's just helping our students to reach that. So talking about differentiation, how is that even done? So Tomlinson comments a few ways that this can happen, and this can be through the content that we teach as teachers, the process of teaching, the products of what we teach. So maybe one student is expected to produce this much work, whereas the student who suffers with ASD might actually be a very much lesser product that is asked of them. And the learning environment can also change. That can have a big impact on how the student learns and works. So one of those things, first of all, is nonverbal communication. So people with ASD tend to have communication deficits. And that's not to say that all of them do, and it's not to say that all of them can't speak at all, but it is suggesting that sometimes they can't. And for the purpose of this task, I am making the assumption that the child that I am researching is very young, and that they cannot speak very much at all, that they are really, really trying to, but might not be able to. So the child needs to be able to communicate, and whether that be through sign language, through picture communication systems, it can even be included as apps. That's what Dawson and Elder say, where the child produces words, and that's what I'm going to go through now. So obviously it has a mathematics focus, but so the program Visuals to Go, that is a digital tool for the students' iPads, and it's very basic, but it's getting them to understand these different concepts and actually put pictures to words, to sounds, to actually understand what they are, and to actually start learning, because these students are very, very low levels, and even to start understanding patterns, to understand how to make shapes. This one is also really good because it goes through numbers, and you can also, there's down at the bottom, there's a sequence bar, so that they can start counting maybe in twos, they can start counting in threes, gets them to understand there's the symbol, and this is how it sounds, and this is what it looks like. So there's a lot of apps out there, and I guess it just comes down to the school budget and the specific student and what works best for them. So you'd really be working with parents as well with this. But yeah, it just helps with the familiarization, pronunciation. It's, like I said, shapes, colors. It goes through a lot of mathematics things. Another issue that students might have is sensory issues. So Tomczyk and Dunn came to the conclusion that around 95%, which is most people who have ASD, demonstrate a degree of sensory processing dysfunction. And while every person is different, it really comes down to knowing your student's unique sensory profile. And it's so important that you really do know the student and work with them, because every student will react differently. But a few different ideas would, and some, classroom strategies would be for a student who loves to touch things, play with soft things, that can actually form quite an obsession. You can actually get like a little tape. They're called sensory tables, and they're just like little boxes, and you can have, say, fill them with shaving cream or wet sand or anything that's sensory, and the student can actually practice, say, writing numbers or patterns or shapes, or experimenting with anything that would have to do with, like, say, writing on a piece of paper. You can transfer to then just writing in a box into the shaving cream, or even using paint like the picture. The students can use paint, or even at the top, those light tables, that's sensory with the lights, as well as the feeling of those rubber shapes or numbers. They can start to experiment with, okay, that's the number 1. This is what it looks like. This is its shape, and play around with things like that. And if they really needed extra help, you could even get a piece of paper and say, can you please copy what's on the piece of paper into your shaving cream? And that's just a really good way to actually get them working and, yeah, interacting with those sensory issues. Another thing is concrete materials. So providing concrete tactile materials such as counters and pictures will really help facilitate practice. Cook comments that teachers should always be using visuals to manipulate during maths times as much as possible. And when teaching numbers and their values, teachers not only use the number and symbol, but also a visual of how many that represents. So for example, there's these things called number maps. And what you get is these little blocks that also join together, and they can also come apart. And these maps can be printed off and laminated. So you can use a whiteboard marker on them as well that wipes off. And the little blocks, you would obviously create the number. So line it up with the number 7. You would pull apart these blocks and place 7 so that you could see how many represent 7. Even coloring in little dots to represent how many is 7. And then also writing the word 7 so that they are practicing those literacy skills as well. So hands-on. Autism Research Institute states that if an autistic child is constantly taking things apart, opening and closing, pushing in buttons, that might actually indicate that they are kinesthetic or hands-on learner. So an idea for an activity for someone with that sort of kinesthetic drive would be to use concrete materials and fine motor skills, as well as counting. So like this activity here is the truck roll and count. So they have to roll the dice, and say it landed on 5, they would pick up 5 of their little trucks and put it into one of their little compartments, and then roll it again and put as many into that as well. So they're counting, it's using colors, it's using actual tactile materials. A really, really good thing is musical incorporation. So music actually stimulates both sides of the brain, and it benefits both cognitive functioning and language skills. That was from Bologna, which is in 2017. Music also shares a neutral system with the motor control, language, attention, memory, and executive functioning. So you're actually getting all these different parts of your brain to function and to fire, and that's actually helping with their memory, with their ability to learn new things. Musical activities include singing, playing instruments, and it can actually increase the self-esteem level of a child. So there's so many videos out there that have to do with singing and mathematics, and there's a few that I found, like there's a song that has to do with patterns and shapes. There's one actually learning shapes and how they're formed. So if it was like for a triangle, it would be like 3 lines, or for a circle, it's just 1 line that goes round and round. Really good for them to familiarize themselves with that. Visual aids. So mathematics can benefit immensely by visuals, and this is because students with additional needs are mostly concrete learners. They really need that visual to understand. So here's the concept, and here's visually how it looks, and so that they can make those connections. The way that this can be tailored to specific child is incorporating their interests. So if you remember the roll dice and the picking up the little trucks, that would be really good for a child that is obsessed with trucks. And normally with ASD, there are students those children really fixate on one or two things that they absolutely love. This could be a color, this could be an animal, an object like the trucks. It could be something, but it's really, as a teacher, finding out what is that thing and how can you incorporate that. So flashcards are great if you're doing a number. Maybe they love the color orange. You could just have heaps of flashcards that are orange with the numbers and have them sequencing different orange things, trucks, fairies, whatever it may be. Just having that help them. So all of these suggestions, they work together, and with knowing the student and having extra support there will really help a student with ASD to succeed and to learn mathematics. And I think it really comes down to the student and knowing what they like and what they can do, and just trying to challenge them. Like a few of those things you can really build on to challenge. It depends where the student's up to, but maybe it's taking away a certain element so that it actually gets harder for them. Or maybe it's instead of just having the student look at trucks, it could be something else. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah.